Thanks for clicking on this video, which will be an overview of the Healing the Mother-Daughter Wound workshop, which I really look forward to hosting. It's something that has become a really core part of my coaching practice with empathetic, purpose-driven women leaders. It's a pivotal part of my research with gender narratives and social deconstruction of narratives of female servanthood. So I hope that this is something that's helpful if you're considering attending one of these workshops or interested in it for your own personal information or individual coaching. So the first thing I want to share is really how I came to be interested in this topic. And my entire career has really been focused on working with women in a therapeutic capacity as a domestic violence prevention counselor, as a legislative analyst for women's health policy, and later as an ordained Presbyterian clergy. I've always worked with women, in particular women in different generations who are overcoming different experiences of trauma. And as a pastor in particular, I worked with both older women and adult daughters and found that the experiences that both had really pointed to this prevalent mother-daughter wound in today's society, where adult women who are perhaps millennial or Gen X, who have mothers who are baby boomer or slightly older, have such a different experience being a woman based on the huge social changes that have happened in the past century with women's leadership and women's agency. And so that's why there is a lack of symmetry between mother-daughter relationships right now that hasn't been seen as much in the past, where generationally between women there was more of a similarity between social mobility and access to decision-making, choice, and agency, whereas it's a much bigger gap now between those generations. So as I became a doctoral researcher and did qualitative research on women's experiences, this dynamic came up consistently, and it's something that I'm very interested in, and helping women journey through and understand some language and social theory around it to be able to heal and move forward in their life and in their relationships. So what you can expect from this workshop are a couple of things. First, I'll talk about some of the psychology behind the mother-daughter relationship, both kind of the positive elements of mirroring and also the development of empathetic relationships, which often can, in the best case, develop between mothers and their children, in particular mothers and daughters. But there is also the psychology behind gender narratives of female self-sacrifice, or the female human giver, and expectations that then the next generation of women take on that role as well. That becomes a primary point of conflict. So unpacking that narrative of the self-sacrificial woman. And then another important piece that I look at is family systems theory. This is a way of looking at how anxiety is absorbed within family systems, and oftentimes women being expected to be the empathetic absorber of conflict is passed down as an expectation to younger women in family systems. So similarly to some of that challenge of relational difficulty and conflicting expectations, there is an element of trauma that comes with the mother-daughter wound, and not so much trauma of a particular event. It can be that. That's often what we think about, a traumatic event or traumatic situation. But what can be traumatic is chronic feelings of being silenced. And so women for generations, really throughout history, have societally been silenced, their experiences minimized. And when you compound that within a family system, that kind of trauma of being silenced chronically can get passed down to women in the next generation. It lives in our bodies. It's a huge part of the work that I do is embodied trauma recovery, that traumatic experiences not only are an emotional or cognitive experience, but an embodied experience that requires embodied healing. We'll also talk about the parentified daughter as a dynamic, and also the surrogate spouse. This is when adult mothers who are experiencing emotional neglect in their own lives may inadvertently expect their younger daughter to fulfill those emotional needs for the mother, and that absolutely creates elements of the mother-daughter wound. Another important topic we'll talk about is the process of self-differentiation and individuation, more simply known as boundaries. When one establishes boundaries, identifying that one's experience is separate from another's is a really important developmental process of healing from the mother-daughter wound. Throughout the workshop, there'll be opportunities for sharing. For those who feel comfortable, we'll be able to do sort of some case study, thinking through situations and how to manage that and how to work through that. And again, those who feel comfortable can share from their own personal experience. Following that, we'll work on what's called the 3-generation mapping, which is based on the incredible work of Rosjke, Hasseldine, and the mother-daughter puzzle. I'll link that below in the video here. And each person will have the opportunity to map out the 3 generations that are in their family of women, self, mother, and grandmother, to see the ways in which harmful gender narratives have been compounded and passed down through generations, and ways in which one can identify and overcome those. And throughout, and again, this is an important part of trauma recovery and embodied recovery, is I'll be offering some very specific breathing and somatic exercises or embodied exercises, which can help anyone, regardless of whether it's a mother-daughter wound or any relational challenge, is to regulate the nervous system response to anxiety and to conflict. And so these practices will be things that one can incorporate in their own day-to-day life when faced with really difficult moments of decision or responses to others. Being able to regulate one's own nervous system response can help one become more grounded and able to access one's voice in those really difficult situations. So that's a little bit of a glimpse of what you can expect at the Healing the Mother-Daughter Wound workshop, or small group and individual coaching around this theme. So I look forward to seeing you, and feel free to look at the description box below for how to find more on this topic and my work with empathetic and purpose-driven women.